Welcome everyone to Not That Media. My name is John, and in today's video I want to have a look at and discuss, give my thoughts and opinions of the announcement that Jodie Whittaker and Mandip Gill have returned to the whoniverse, not on television but in Big Finish audio. So come along with me as I discuss the return of the 13th Doctor. This video is going to be broken down into three sections. The first being the facts as they've been presented by the BBC and Big Finish. The second is my thoughts on the announcement. And the third is my speculation and wish list for the upcoming audios. Now, from a facts perspective, there is very little to no information being given at this point. The announcement came on the 13th of July 2024 that Jodie Whittaker and Mandip Gill would be returning to Doctor Who for 12 one-hour audio adventures with Big Finish. They will begin in July 2025 and can conclude in May 2027 with one release every 2 months. The physical CD copies, which include a download, are $11.99 each, or digital download only is $9.99. Both are available in bundles with £126 for all 12 CDs and digital download, or £102 for the digital download only. No other information has been given, no character information, no storyline information, no placement about where this is in the Doctor's timeline, so there isn't really a whole lot more to say in terms of facts other than what I've just told you. So with very little facts available, my thoughts become very clear. This is a really positive thing. We will have in 2025 4 new audios to listen to with a new Doctor, a new era, a fresh take for Big Finish. Presumably this may bring in some new writers, some new direction. They will be able to do things with the 13th Doctor that they perhaps can't do with other Doctors at this point in time. I feel like 2025 is quite literally going to be the year of the 13th Doctor for Big Finish. We kick off with the Fugitive Doctor into Call Me Master. Both of them have got sequel box sets announced for 2025, and as I say, the first four one-hour CDs of Jodie Whittaker's era will be released. So it's really reassuring to know that Doctor Who and Big Finish can continue to evolve as the series continues. It's really reassuring to know that Big Finish doesn't actually have to continue to rely on the older Doctors. No disrespect to any of them, I love all the Doctors, but it's a rejuvenation or a regeneration, we probably should be saying, for Big Finish, because it means that a different Doctor has a different take, a different idea, a different perspective on stories. So it's just nice to know that pool of content will expand. Currently we have every single Doctor represented in some fashion. It's great to see the Fugitive Doctor, as I've already mentioned. So it really does feel like 2025 is going to be the year of the 13th Doctor. One thought that I do have that I'm quite excited about is the fact that these 12 one-hour stories means that for the first time we're going to have a clean sweep of narrative 13th Doctor adventures. Now, to explain that, Series 11, Jodie's first season, was 9 hours and 27 minutes across those episodes. Season 12 was 10 hours and 3 minutes, and season 13 was only 8.5 hours. So the fact that we're going to get 12 hours of new content all mapped out in advance, all prepared in advance, recorded in one job lot, means that I think for the first time, and I appreciate people will say, oh, well, Chris Chibnall was in charge of the whole thing. Yeah, but it was a bit here, a bit there, pandemic, this, that, cut this, don't do that, don't do this. 12 clean sweep episodes in one go every 2 months. I think that's a really good thing, and I'm really excited to see that play out because it just adds some consistency to sadly a very inconsistent era. In terms of the breakdown of how these are being sold, I have seen a little bit of complaints online that these are not proper box sets. These are individual CDs, 12 over such a long period of time. For me, I actually really like that. I think Big Finish, as fantastic as they are, their content is just too thick now. If you're like me, I pre-order virtually everything that is Doctor Who related. I have left Torchwood behind. I have made a conscious decision to do that, and I'll explain that in another video another day. But if you're like me, you're getting 4, 5, 6 pre-orders a month, and there just isn't enough time to kind of jump on these as and when they arrive. So rather than getting a box set every 4 months that has 3-hour stories that may get lost in the pile, it's actually reassuring to know that from 2025 in May, 1 hour, it's easier to give up an hour than it is to give up 3, 4 hours in a block. block. I'll be able to listen to a part, then 2 months later go back. But also it has that rolling effect that if I start to enjoy certain ones, I'll listen to them again in advance. So I think it's actually a very smart idea. I think if Jodie is only committed to these 12 CDs, then you would want to spread that out. I think the price is actually very reasonable. I have seen some negativity on Facebook and social media about how Big Finish are ripping people off. But actually, from this perspective, if you are like me to pre-order the bundle, you're actually future-proofing your budget, because every year, as with everything, postage will go up, costs will go up, manufacturing costs will go up. Right now, £126 bundle for 12 CDs. It's a saving, I think, of about £13 if you were to buy them each individually. But in 2025, there probably will be a price increase. 2026 will see a price increase. So to buy 3 years of content for one amount now, a fixed amount, I actually think is a really positive thing. It also means, going back to the box set things, individual cover art for each CD. One of my niggles about Big Finish recently is that their box sets, they've stopped doing individual cover arts and individual sleeves within them. I understand why. It's expensive getting artists in. There's only so many pictures of Paul McGann pointing at the sky that you can actually put on a CD cover before it gets stale. But actually I quite like the idea that if we've got this new era, there's all that promotional material of the 13th Doctor. Why not use it? Get 12 nice new covers. It'll look great on the shelf. Yeah, it'll take up a lot of room on the shelf, but personally, I like the idea that the 13th Doctor's adventures are going to be more in line with the original 4th and 8th Doctor adventures, and it feels more like an event to take place, so I think that's all good. In terms of speculation, this thing is an open minefield to discuss, and I'm going to try and keep it as basic and quick as I can. I believe from a timeline perspective that these stories are best fitted between Revolution of the Daleks and the Flux. When we join Yaz and the 13th Doctor in the Flux, it is very clear that time has passed and numerous adventures have taken place. Yaz is much more confident and even has an understanding of how to operate the TARDIS, and their friendship is very clear. So it'd be really nice as part of these sets to actually see that relationship develop. Another speculation I have, and I really hope this comes to fruition, is that I really want these Big Finish audios to serve as somewhat of a redemption for the 13th Doctor. Rightly or wrongly, fairly or unfairly, a lot of people have quite negative opinions of the 13th Doctor and her era. I actually blame the writing, the executive producing, and the showrunner more than I would blame Jodie Whittaker for the choices of her era. I just think, unfortunately, she was dealt a little bit of a bad hand, and the global pandemic in the middle of it did not help her. It's funny though, because opportunity can sometimes repeat itself in that when you go back now and look at the 6th Doctor's audios, everybody loves the 6th Doctor. Old Sixie is his nickname. Colin Baker is much loved in the world of Big Finish. But you go back to his TV era, he was actually a really unliked Doctor. And when he left, it then came out afterwards that there was a lot of trouble behind the scenes and creative decisions, bad writing, the executive producer, head runner, making choices that were against the logic of the show actually harmed his Doctor. The show was taken off the air for 18 months on a hiatus. So I actually find it quite fascinating that in the long line of Doctor Who history, the 6th Doctor and the 13th Doctor's eras actually mirror each other in a number of different ways. So I'm really hopeful that these Big Finish audios will have the same magic they did for the 6th Doctor and redeem her in the ears of many of these fans who criticise her, again, rightly or wrongly. One of my big wish list items is for the 13th Doctor on audio to spend much more time in reflection and the classic era. Now, what I mean by this is, and this is my opinion, the 13th Doctor's era, with the exception of Power of the Doctor, because that was very deliberately set up for nostalgia, the 13th Doctor's era doesn't really spend a lot of time going over the past, both what's happened in the new series and the classic series. She doesn't really spend a lot of time dwelling on things, the loss of companions, the Time War, for example. There's very little to no discussion about any of those kind of things, and I always felt that was a little disappointing. I understand the narrative reasons why not to do that, because obviously Chibnall was trying to make his own era, but I think Big Finish's bread and butter is nostalgia. Whilst I do anticipate and predict that the majority of these Jodie Whittaker CDs will probably be new individual stories with new individual aliens, I do think that they should spend some time to reflect on certain events. I would really like to see an episode where the effects of the Time War are felt on the 13th Doctor and Yaz. If the 13th Doctor and Yaz are supposed to have the relationship they do by the end of Power of the Doctor, you would have thought at some point Yaz would have been told about the Time War in much more detail than I think a passing line on the show. It's one of those situations where I think character development is really important. One of my complaints about the Whittaker era is too many companions. There was way too many companions, and similar to the early Peter Davison era, they all ended up being split up, locked in cupboards, sitting in the TARDIS, doing all kinds of things. So there was very little time to actually expand on the relationships of the Doctor and the companions. Because we've got Yaz and the Doctor one-on-one, these CDs have the opportunity to do that, and it will be a crime if they don't actually spend some time to look back. I'm not saying that the Whittaker era needs to be completely nostalgic with Big Finish, but like I said, because Big Finish, they work in nostalgia, it's an inevitability. The big speculation that everyone wants to talk about, of course, is who is Jodie Whittaker's 13th Doctor going to meet? Which classic companions, classic monsters, who's going to pop up, turn up and do all these kind of things? I don't think there's going to be that much of it. I'm going to call that now. That's one of my big speculations. It's not a wish, it's a speculation. Is I don't think these 12 episodes will necessarily have too many classic characters showing up. That being said, I think it would be an absolute crime for, especially since she's just started her new sets of box sets herself, River Song, of course. It's inevitable. River Song has got to meet the 13th Doctor, and this is the only chance, realistically, we're going to get. Now, it's possible that, as I mentioned earlier in my thoughts, it's actually possible that maybe the 13th Doctor would show up in a River Song box set as opposed to River in Doctor Who. But it doesn't make a difference. Either way, River Song has got to meet the 13th Doctor. One that I would be really fascinated, and this is my wish list that I think if this happens, I will be shocked. But I'm going to put it out there. I would really, really like, in either of his iterations or a new iteration, I would really like the 13th Doctor to encounter the Curator on audio. I think the Curator as a character is still so fascinating and so interesting, and such an opportunity to continue the Who in Doctor Who. His fleeting meetings with Paul McGann's Doctor and with Unit and a few other bits and pieces that we've had have all been great. And in the Once and Future, when he encounters the Fifth Doctor, all fantastic stories. But I would be really interested to have a story, and I'll put it out there, I would love to have a story where the Fugitive Doctor, the 13th Doctor, and the Curator are all together. That would be a multi-Doctor story that I don't think anyone would call, and it'd be so fascinating because you've got the present Doctor in the 13th Doctor, you've got the future Curator and the past Fugitive Doctor. 3 iterations. They're so different from each other in many ways. To give them a problem to tackle as a trio, and the Curator might be aware of things, the Fugitive Doctor might have a very different view. I just think it'd be fascinating to see those 3 characters interact. So it's inevitable, I think, just to move on to that, I think it's inevitable that the Fugitive Doctor will show up in those 12 CDs. Again, although it is covered in the TV show quite a lot, I just feel like there's more to plunder with the Fugitive Doctor, and I think that she will make appearances in those 12 CDs, be it a cameo or maybe as part of her box sets there'll be some cross-pollination, but I think it's an inevitability that the Fugitive Doctor is going to make an appearance. One other companion that I would love the Doctor to meet, but just purely because I think that it would just be fun. And I think sometimes we forget that. It doesn't have to be, the tale of the broken-hearted or the lost or the dispossessed or the forgotten, things like that. Sometimes it's just nice to have the companion, meet an old companion, take them by the hand, and just go running into an adventure. So on my wish list for the 13th Doctor to meet, I want her to meet Leela, and I mean old Leela, as was witnessed on the final day of the Time War. I think of all the Doctor's companions, She is the most loyal, she is the most dedicated, she has given the most, she has lost the most. Old companions can complain, Ace can complain, as much as I love Ace, you know, Charlotte Pollard being displaced in time, Yaz being left behind when the Doctor regenerated. I think when you actually look at a companion that has lost so much in the name of the Doctor, Leela is that character. But I also think in the same way as School Reunion changed or improved the dynamic between Ten and Rose when Sarah Jane showed up, I think I would really like Yaz to be presented with a situation where she's not the first, and she knows she's not the first. When she shows up in Power of the Doctor, it's very clear that, you know, it's not. Although they treat it as a "oh, we used to be you" kind of a thing, Ace says to Yaz. Yaz isn't too surprised that there's been other companions, but I would just love to see, bringing it all back to what I said earlier about the Time War and reflections on the past. I would just love for Leela to show up with all her damage, all of her past, all of her loyalty, and still be smiles and starry eyes at the sight of the Doctor, and for Yaz to either draw inspiration or perhaps see what her future will be. Moving on to the monsters, I don't really think, from my own wish list, that I want to see or hear too many old monsters come back. I think for me, wish list number one is that Jodie does not encounter any classic monster that was represented in her era. So no Weeping Angels, no Sontarans, no Cybermen, no Daleks. If there's a Time War story, unfortunately Daleks will be inevitable. But none of those kind of monsters. We don't want to have them. They're represented significantly in the Whittaker era, it has to be said. So I would actually like to see time dedicated, if we only have one or two, I would really love to see or hear a Hannibal Lecter style story, which Big Finish is very good at. They do every so often, which would have the 13th Doctor and Yaz confront Davros in some kind of a way. Now, it can be modern Davros or it can be classic Davros. It really doesn't make a difference, because Davros, of all the monsters, has straddled both eras. And when he meets new Doctors, when classic Davros met David Tennant in the Dalek Wars, it's not met with a lot of shock. And so I think Davros being placed in a situation where he needs the 13th Doctor, or vice versa, she needs him, would be really interesting. And I think that, particularly in the new series, they're very good at it, and the audios, Davros is really good at getting under the Doctor's skin. And I think that he's really good at reminding the Doctor as to what he was. So going back to what I was saying a moment ago about the Doctor being, remembering her past, being forced to confront things, I think Davros is the character to do that. This smiley blonde-haired lady comes running in all like happy and smiley with Yaz, and here is this thing to sit there and say, who are you to be what you are? You are a monster. I look the way I do, but you are the monster. And again, it forces Yaz to confront truths about the Doctor that the show didn't really spend a lot of time doing. Davros has been present during some of the worst actions of multiple Doctors, and he is one of the very few monsters that's actually been able to break down the Doctor. So it doesn't need to be a big Dalek story, it doesn't need to be full of Time War, timey-wimey nonsense like that. I would just love to have the 13th Doctor confronted with such a mastermind as Davros. Next, and I think this could work really well in Jodie's era, because she is very high energy, very high octane, a lot of movement. So her companion and her monsters tend to be very similar. So I think one classic monster or classic character who would be great for her to meet is either iteration, the meddling monk or the nun. Now, personally, I think the nun would be the one that they would go for, although it would be amazing to hear Rufus Hound interacting with Jodie Whittaker. But I think they go for the nun because, obviously, it has to be said, the female representation, obviously the 13th Doctor versus the nun, it makes sense to me. The Nun's a great character. I think that her meddling and her silliness and her fun to what she's doing is actually a very good mirror to the 13th Doctor again. They're actually very similar in a number of ways. The difference is the 13th Doctor does the right thing, whereas the Nun does the wrong thing. We know, mild spoilers, we know that the meddling monk slash the Nun escaped the Time War. They exist post-Time War. Rufus Hound's meddling monk has had many adventures with Missy, which take place post-Time War. So the meddling monk is out there. She is out there, and it's just begging for a reunion. Which brings me on to my third and final prediction or wish list for upcoming villains in the 13th Doctor's era. I would love, and again, I think this is on everybody's list, I would love for Missy to show up. Missy is, I think personally, a fantastic character on TV and audio. Michelle Gomez is so good as that character, and she's so powerful, and I would just love for Missy and the 13th Doctor to have an adventure. We know from Masterful, it is established that John Sim knows that the Doctor is a woman. When he's talking to the other Masters, he refers to the Doctor in the female tense. So it is established, and it's an opportunity in Big Finish, if John Sim ever returns, for the Saxon Master to encounter Jodie Whittaker. So the fact that Missy could quite happily show up knowing the Doctor is female, you don't need to mess around with that, you don't need to play around with that, we can just jump straight in. I would love, in my mind, just some ridiculously callous line about how the Doctor's copying Missy. Oh, the Master used to be male, now she's female. Oh, well, the Doctor was always copying me in Gallifrey in high school and things like that. Some silly little line like that. I just think it'd be a lot of fun. I think it would also be very interesting because the TV show has never done this. I would just love to have a post-Capaldi Doctor interact with Missy, bearing in mind we know where they left their relationship. Would the 13th Doctor be actually very angry and feel very betrayed by Missy, whereas Missy, who obviously doesn't know what she's going to do, has to deal with the fact that here is a Doctor who has future knowledge of her and she ain't happy. I think there's some real good gold to mine there. I think the fact that Missy did return to help the 12th Doctor until she was brutally murdered by the Master is such a sad idea. And to play with that idea in that the 13th Doctor never knew that Missy actually was redeemed. So to have a position where the 13th Doctor is looking at Missy as it's just the same old moustache-twirling villain you've always been, with Missy on the road to becoming the good that she was, I just think there's a really good dynamic there and a really interesting idea. I'm sorry if I'm not explaining myself properly. I am talking very off the cuff. I just think that there's some great ideas, and they all seem to revolve around the same theme, which is having the 13th Doctor tackle the past, look backwards and say, okay, this is where I've come to, because I just don't think her era did that. In terms of multi-Doctor stories, I think it would be great to have Jodie Whittaker encounter Paul McGann or Sylvester McCoy or Colin Baker. I think there's a real cool idea to do that. Whether or not Big Finish will do that, I just don't know. Whether or not Jodie is comfortable doing that, I don't know. Obviously, in The Power of the Doctor, we did see her interacting with the Guardians of the Edge, which were iterations of each of those Doctors. I would like to see like an Out of Time trilogy part 2, where the 13th Doctor has to side with the 8th Doctor and solve a problem, or the 7th Doctor. I think that'd be really cool. But you don't just want to do it for the sake of doing it. And the last one that I will call out on my wish list is I really feel like the 13th Doctor and Yaz have to go to Paternoster Row. The Paternoster gang are well established in Big Finish. They're in their second series right now. They're currently meeting other classic Doctors, the Tom Baker, Paul McGann. Why would you not have Jodie Whittaker in the mix as well? I would love for Strax to refer to the 13th Doctor as boy. That running joke would be fantastic, and I think it would work really well. So big wish list there is the 13th Doctor and Yaz, the Paternoster gang, It's just got to be done. So I think that's going to do it. If you are new here and you did enjoy this video, please do like and subscribe. I do have a lot more content for Doctor Who coming up, but also a lot of other content. Not That Media is not just a Doctor Who channel. I'm trying to spread it out as much as I can. So if you're a fan of horror, theme parks, books, etc., physical media, hopefully there's a little bit more than just the Doctor Who content to keep you going. I have plans for a lot of Doctor Who content in the future. I think this is a fantastic announcement. I can't wait to hear it. It was a day one pre-order for me. I think it's always good for a new Doctor and a new era to come into Big Finish, to rejuvenate, regenerate it. After 25 years of Big Finish, although they're still going strong, it just goes to show that there's new opportunities, new surprises around every corner if you're a fan. It's a great time to be a Doctor Who fan. So with that being said, I'll see you on the next video.